This story contains adult language and themes, including but not limited to violence, murder, sexual assault, self-harm, and suicide. Discretion is advised. Welcome to Hell. This is The Hidden Mountain, Episode 3. When people first arrive in Hell, they typically come with a ton of questions. Is this it? Ranks high up there, right behind, where are the flames? And seriously, where are the flames? If they're lucky, that's where the questions end. Unfortunately, most eventually get to the next most popular question by frequency, and it's a heartbreaker. Now what? It's then that if you could stare into their eyes, you would see their soul sag into an oppression that would never again let them breathe free. The fact that they, and they alone, were the sole architects of their lives. The mirror spins inwards, creating a dizzying effect on the mind, and they have nowhere else to turn. No clever trick to make them the victim. The charade is over, and now they have to face the truth of themselves. Welcome to Hell. The question sitting at number 22 by order of popularity between number 21, why am I still hungry, and number 23, how long can this go on before I lose my mind, is the question, how big is Hell exactly? Well, that's a bit tricky. As many love songs have pointed out over the years, the line between love and hate can be thinner than a drunkard's flattery. However, that line can seem bright and firm in the moment, with love being separated from hate by a gigantic chasm, only to discover in the next second that what you hated was the thing you wanted all along, and suddenly that huge canyon is just a crack in the sidewalk that you simply step over to be with your love. This is to say that distance in Hell is more than a matter of meters, and measurements like far or miles aren't accurate exactly. Nevertheless, distance is a real thing, and two people can be sitting on the same couch while still being on different planets altogether. It is better to ask, how far would you walk in Hell before losing all hope? At the outer edge of that limit, a lost soul lies face down on the hard desert floor. Consciousness arrives in waves, each undulation moving him further onto the shores of the waking, and then suddenly a spasm of coughs racks his thin frame. He grimaces, and deep lines appear around the edges of his eyes, then quickly fill with tears. His throat hurts, and he feels a weird sensation in his mouth. He disgorges 4 teeth and a fair amount of blood into his hands. Disgusted and confused, he drops the teeth to the cracked desert floor and absent-mindedly wipes his hand across his white shirt. It looks like he high-fived a freshly painted barn and then immediately had to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. The taste of blood fades quickly from his tongue and is replaced by nothing. He finds this gray numbness odd, but is quickly overwhelmed with other questions like, where am I? Or how did I get here? Incidentally, number 2 and 17 by order of frequency. And other such queries, but there are no memories to help him. He can't remember anything. He sees flashes of images, but as soon as he tries to focus on one, it disappears like smoke into a fog. As he struggled to his feet, he realized he was barefoot and wondered how he had walked all the way out into the middle of the desert without shoes. Suddenly, he noticed a book on the hard-scrabbled ground beside him and bent to pick it up. A folded sheet of paper flittered from inside the cover, and before he could retrieve it, a gust of malodorous wind snatched it up and bore it away towards the horizon. The thick paperback appeared to be an old school book, but the title Pilgrim's Progress meant nothing to him. He wondered if there was anything else stashed between the pages, and was surprised to find that when he flipped through the rest of the book, it was completely blank. At the bottom of the front cover, scrawled in black marker by a childish hand, was the name Jacob P. Jacob, he said aloud, just to feel the name in his mouth. It seemed familiar, but something tasted off. He couldn't name what it was, but then again, he couldn't name himself either. All around him, the vastness of the desert threatened to swallow him whole. He could see no sign of life anywhere, and the sun was directly overhead, denying him so much as a direction he might choose. While he stood there, letting his mind spin, he thought he saw a shape coming towards him. Finally, a rescuer. He ran towards the person, waving his arms and screaming, "Hello, I'm here, hello!" But there was no response. He moved in their direction, still yelling and swinging his arms until he was close enough to see that this was not an operation. It wasn't a team of highly trained search and rescue personnel, but a young girl who seemed to be sprinting at her top speed towards him. He could see that she was paying him no mind. Instead, she kept looking back at a man who followed her at some distance with the relaxed, easy gait of an apex predator. "Hey," Jacob called out, "over here!" The girl stopped several meters away and narrowed her eyes with suspicion. "Who are you?" she demanded. Jacob didn't know how to answer, and as he stood there dumbly, she continued, "Are you human?" He had never been asked that before. "I think so." "What's your name?" Her voice was tinged with panic. "Jacob," he replied, and then added, "Jacob Pilgrim," to make it sound more official. The girl glanced back at her pursuer, who had now drawn much closer than seemed possible in the short amount of time she'd been interrogating Jacob. She moved quickly towards him and grabbed his arm, pulling him away from the man. "We need to go," she pleaded, her eyes full of fright and her voice trembling. "Now!" Before Jacob could form a thought, the man was almost on top of them. His appearance stunned Jacob into a momentary lapse of all thought. The man was wearing a beautifully tailored black suit with a crisp white shirt and black necktie. On his lapel was a sticker that read, "Hello, my name is blank," but there was nothing in the blank. The girl was quietly shrinking behind Jacob as the man moved ever forward, his shiny shoes barely making a dent in the desert sands. Everything about him was manicured. Every hair was in place and did not move in the breeze. Oversized designer sunglasses covered much of his handsome face, and a large smile displayed perfect teeth. Even when he spoke, he never stopped smiling.
"Margot Fontaine,"
he said with a voice full of volume but empty of emotion.
"you must come with me now."
Jacob stepped towards him and began to speak. "Hey man," Jacob said hopefully, "we were wondering," but before he could finish the sentence, the man in the suit pushed him aside with one arm and the force of a speeding truck. Jacob hurtled to the ground several yards away and skidded to a stop. Margot let out a scream and sprinted in the opposite direction from where the man had appeared, towards the mountains. She didn't care how far away they were. It was the only shelter she could see, and she was going to try and reach them. The man in the suit simply followed her at the same determined pace that had brought him here. It was as though he had only one speed, but that speed was unstoppable. Jacob struggled to stand and get his wits aligned. He searched desperately for a weapon, but the desert was barren of anything he could use, even rocks. Instead, he picked up his book and hurled it at the man's back, hitting him right between the shoulder blades. "Hey, fucko!" Jacob shouted, but the man continued after Margot, taking no notice of the assault. Jacob sprinted after them and got right in front of the man. Putting his hand out, he thought he might make the man stop, or at the very least, slow down. "Listen," Jacob began, but then a solid strike to his chest launched him again, hurling him so far this time that he actually caught up to Margot. "Come on!" She hauled him to his feet. "We have to go!" Together, they fled across the desert toward the safety of the mountains. All the while, the man in the suit strode after them at that same unrelenting but relaxed pace, wearing that same fake smile on his face.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Hidden Mountain. Follow us for new episodes or visit findthehiddenmountain.com for more information.